Give me a couple more. The Q60 two-door sport coupe is a vehicle without a ton of history. However, it is branded by Infiniti, made by Nissan, as we all know full well. The Infiniti Sport Coupes do have a brief amount of history dating back to 2015, giving us a few years of history to go over. To get you educated on some historically important, however, brain-melting Nissan and Infiniti knowledge, the platform on which this car was built by Nissan back in the day is called the Nissan FM platform. Now, FM itself is a derivative from front midships, which is based on the fact that these engines are all actually located right behind the front axle center line, along with getting the motor as close to the firewall as possible, resulted in very close to 50-50 weight distribution. Now, this platform debuted in 2001 with the V35 series Nissan Skyline, or better known in the US as the G35, which does share the same VQ35NA V6 power plant as the Z33 and the 350Z. Now, this car was proven to be a driver's car and is still seen hitting the track today as a great platform for beginner drivers. Also great for somebody who's desiring heavy modifications. In 2007, Nissan introduced the next generation in the family, the G37, and Nissan had 5 years of developing this younger brother to the G35, which means that, I mean, to be honest with you, they started planning for this model as soon as the G35 hit your local car dealership for the first time. In 2015, the final year of the G37 Infiniti, they decided to rename the car to the Q40. This makes a change into the Q line, including the redesigned emblem and the reduced body color options. A year before Infiniti actually closed their doors on the Q40, they introduced a new kid on the block at the North American Auto Show. The Q50, this car came with tons of options, as the course of its life had 5 different motor options. One of those being a diesel and another actually being labeled as a hybrid. Now, the motor we're talking about today was introduced in 2016 and is called the VR30 DDTT, not to be confused with the VR38 DETT found in the R35 GTR. Now, this 3-liter twin-turbo V6 beast has tons of features and quirks, which has tons of pros and cons when it comes time to modify. Now, that is actually what we're here to talk about today, so why don't we get into that? All right, you guys, now before we get into the pros and the cons of owning and modifying a Q50 or Q60, I wanna go ahead and make sure you guys know to hit that subscribe button so you stay up to date on all of the uploads that we have on our channel, and hit that notification bell if you wanna be one of the first people to watch them. Not to mention, if you're looking for car parts for your vehicle, a car you'd wanna modify, or anything else on the road, go ahead and check out our website, MAPerformance.com, where we're home of the MAP guarantee, which you already know what that means: fast free shipping on orders over $199, price match guarantee, people available 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, and not to mention 2% back on any purchase that you make, so you can get the next part you want to buy a little bit cheaper. But anyways, let's jump into today's video. All right, so first off, let's go ahead and jump into the pros of this vehicle. Now, for one, the body lines on this car are absolutely amazing in my opinion. It has just enough of an aggressive look while still maintaining some of that luxurious styling that you'd come to expect from the Infiniti platform. So if you're looking for a bit more of an upscaled yet sporty sedan and or coupe in this case, this would be an amazing vehicle for you to choose. Now, obviously, one thing that we're gonna go ahead and add is that just like any other car, a front lip, lower to the ground, and some really dope wheels actually help accent the body lines phenomenally. This is what's gonna bring out some of that sporty look that we come to want from the cars we all choose to drive, right? We don't drive these cars because they look like grocery getting sedans. We drive these cars because they're mean, lean, fighting machines, and that's what we want out of our cars. Now, the second is actually, for me, a bit of a pro and also a little bit of a con. The first thing I'll go ahead and say is that the interior in and of itself, the materials and how it feels and the textures of everything are incredibly luxurious. On the car we actually got, we went with the white interior, which in my opinion is a total player move. And you know, if you're not rolling around with cream on the inside and cream on the outside, then shit, what are you doing? But in my opinion, again, interior materials feel phenomenal. You can definitely tell this is made by a luxury manufacturer. Now, the third pro on our list is that the motor itself has a ton of potential. I mean, we're seeing cars in their early stages already upwards of, 800 horsepower by brands like AMS. And to have these cars make 500 horsepower using the AMS kits like our car does is incredibly easy to do. I mean, to be completely honest with you, a little bit of fueling, some cooling, and intakes, obviously a freer flowing catback downpipe setup, we're able to push 500 horsepower on this all day long. If you haven't already, check out the RA500 kit from AMS. That's exactly what we have on our car with a few extras. But again, tons of potential within the motor itself. Turbos are a little bit laggy at sometimes, but with the right tuning, especially this package from AMS, you're gonna be in good shape.
The car is making nearly 500 wheel horsepower, and it drives like a factory car until you don't want it to. You push the gas, and it becomes this absolute animal. I mean, it's just amazing.
Now, to piggyback on that, obviously, as we touched on, the aftermarket offerings for this vehicle are still kind of getting caught up to speed, if I'm being completely honest. Aside from a few manufacturers, including us now, there aren't a ton of people really catering to the Q50 and Q60 platforms. As I had touched on, simple modifications can make good power. All right, now let's move on to the cons, because in all reality, there's a ton of pros to a lot of cars, but what really detracts from them, in my opinion, is the cons, and that's where my buying decisions personally come into play. With this car, if you ask anybody who's looked into purchasing one, I'd go ahead and wager that the biggest thing they have to complain about is that you can't have the car in a manual transmission. It was never offered. You can opt for the paddle shifters in the luxury, sport, red sport models of the car. I believe those are the 3 trim lines that you could opt for the paddle shifters. However, in those vehicles, you may own one with that trim level and not have paddle shifters. The good thing for you is that with a couple $100 and a little bit of mechanical know-how, you could go ahead and insert your own to the back of the steering wheel, and you could have paddle shifters for your automatic transmission. Now, I will go ahead and say that I've done some homework into inserting a 370Z transmission into this platform, and with the exception of a few custom one-off things that we would need to do, it does seem like something that would be possible. We obviously haven't seen a ton of people do it quite yet. However, it's something that we've considered doing to our car in order to help push the platform a little bit further. Let us know if you'd want to see us do something like that down in the comments below, because I will go ahead and say that I'm personally really interested in doing that. And with our car being rear-wheel drive, it would be a ton of fun to get this thing out on the track and maybe go a little bit sideways. The next con on our list is going to be a little bit unique. And again, it's to me because it's not that you expect cars to sound perfect from the factory, right? That's why exhausts are such a popular modification as they are. If you're looking for one, you can go to our website, MAPerformance.com. But these cars are incredibly quiet in stock form. When we built our Q60, the last thing that went on the car for literally no good reason happened to be a catback exhaust. Meaning we did every other modification to get this car up to 500 horsepower, and we lowered it on wheels before we even put on a catback. Now, I know that's usually the very first thing people do because cars do stereotypically come quiet from the factory. There's obviously exceptions to the rule. However, this car is not an exception. It is incredibly quiet from the factory, and in my opinion, it definitely needs a catback and or some type of downpipe to really wake this thing up, because otherwise, instead of sounding like the baby cousin to the R35, it really just sounds like something else, not an R35. Sounds like a Buick Enclave or something else. I mean, it's like a luxury car. So like, it doesn't sound that great, but like with a catback, it's phenomenal. So there you go. Now, the third con on our list is that within the engine bay, things are relatively packed in tight. As we mentioned, as a pro, actually, they intentionally tried to move things close to the firewall and scoot things back. Now, with that being said, there is some room in the front. However, if you're trying to work on something like the downpipes, for example, unless you happen to get lucky where the clamps that hold the downpipes on are in the right rotational spot for you to access them quickly, as I learned from Ben at AMS, who does a lot of the work on the vehicles there, it's a roll of the dice, man. These things can be a pain in the ass to work on because everything is so crammed inside the engine bay, and it just can make it for a not fun time and some busted knuckles. So it is a detractor for me. However, it's also sort of a positive thing. I get why they did it. I just don't love it, I guess. Now, the next con on our list is going to be that these vehicles are direct injection. Now, like I said before, this is a pro and also kind of a con, right? I'll say that this really only comes into play if you're looking to make more than 500 wheel horsepower. Under that, you should be fine. The benefit to it is that you can run flex fuel, meaning you'd be able to run 91, 93, and E85 all back to back without having to necessarily change your tune. And the flex fuel sensor would be able to tell what the fueling is. And again, that's as a benefit to it being a direct injection motor. Now, the next con on our list is actually one for me personally. Installing coilovers on this car, at least the rears, in our experience, is a pain in the ass. We obviously did that down at our friend's place down at Fitman Industries in Appleton, Wisconsin. Even having access to a lift and everything, this was a nightmare. You nearly have to take apart the entire interior of the car, at least again in the rear, to be able to access the top strut mounts. For me personally, I recall struggling with this for many, many hours, and a big gentleman like myself crammed up in the back of a coupe sport car. It's not the most fun. I was really sweaty, really uncomfortable, and it was really only so that I could remove two plates that are covering those strut mounts, and it sucks. It's just not fun. Now, the next con for me is gonna be in 2016 and 2017, the turbos on the car have been known to have a higher rate of failure. That's primarily on modified vehicles. Obviously, as you get up into higher mileage on a stock vehicle, you can see that happening. Our car, when we picked it up, had about 70,000 miles on it, as I recall, and with us now pushing it at around 500 wheel horsepower, I would anticipate us to start having issues with those turbos pretty quickly here. For somebody looking for an upgrade or to preemptively solve that issue before you're stranded on the side of the road somewhere, I would go ahead and do an upgrade or get something sourced in short order, because if you're like us and running with a car with 500 wheel horsepower, you just want to make sure that the turbos do the thing they're supposed to do too, right? Anyways, turbos are going to fail, the seals are going to fail at some point, especially if you're pushing high horsepower or anything really over stock. So in a 16 and 17 model, these just tend to be a higher rate of failure than the later vehicles. The last and final con on our list is that the heat exchanger pretty much needs to be replaced. It's not really an optional thing. The heat exchanger from the factory is like literally this big. They like double it with the AMS one, and then they even have a race heat exchanger that's even thicker. And again, in my experience, and at least the research we've done here, it's not a recommendation, it's a requirement. For me, it's a little bit of a con because it's a must-do. On the bright side, it's not extremely expensive, and it's not going to break your bank like the turbos. So this is a vehicle that I would definitely consider purchasing if I plan to modify it. There's a shorter list of not super surprising or incredibly insane modifications that you'd have to do to keep them reliable and fun at the same time. And the pros vastly outweigh the cons, in my opinion. The potential for these cars, and again, the comfortability and everyday drivability of these that they come with, is really second to none within its price range. Obviously, they were really, really expensive at the beginning of things when they were just sold off the factory line, but as we're seeing some of these cars now into their second, and even in some cases, like a third owner, these have come down in price quite a bit, and you can expect to see one anywhere from the low to mid 20s to mid to high 30s. Let us know what you think down below, and if you're interested in us covering other vehicles in a similar way that we covered this, because you're considering them, let us know down below. We'd love to make a video covering the pros and cons of modifying the vehicles that you guys are considering buying, because to be quite frank, they're probably the same cars we're considering buying. So it saved me some research for later on. Anyways, guys, be sure to subscribe for more content just like this. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.